In the Old Testament, there exists a narrative that, to be frank, I find the most unsettling throughout the entire Bible. It might be deemed unsuitable for younger audiences, therefore, prior to viewing this video, I want to ensure you understand that its content is not appropriate for all age groups and may evoke some past trauma. The tale I refer to is located in chapters 19 to 21 of the book of Judges. Many are acquainted with chapter 19 but overlook the subsequent parts of the story. I believe there are several crucial lessons that you and I can derive from such a troubling narrative. First, I will recount the story as vividly as possible, and then we will delve into the lessons that can be learned. Let us turn to Judges chapter 19. In verse 1, during a time when Israel lacked a king, a Levite residing in a secluded area of the hill country of Ephraim took a woman from Bethlehem in Judah as his concubine. It is important to note that this Levite man lived in the northern region of Israel while his concubine was situated in the south, in Bethlehem. The narrative progresses as she proved unfaithful and returned to her father's home in Bethlehem, where she remained for 4 months. Feeling betrayed, this Levite man decided to retrieve his wife, traveling from the northern hill country of Ephraim south to Bethlehem in search of her. Upon arrival, he found her father to be exceedingly hospitable. Despite the man's repeated requests to leave with his wife, the father insisted he stay for another night. This cycle continued for several days until, with utmost respect, the Levite expressed his need to return home. Eventually, he departed, and that is when tragedy struck. While traveling with his concubine from Bethlehem toward the north, passing near Jebus as dusk approached, the servant suggested they stop for the night in the city of Jebus. However, the Levite declined, stating they would not stay in a foreign city devoid of Israelites and decided to continue to Gibeah. The servant then proposed they aim for either Gibeah or Ramah to find lodging. As night fell, they reached Gibeah in Benjamin, only to discover that no one was willing to welcome them into their homes. Hospitality was a vital aspect of Israelite society. Late that evening, an elderly man appeared in the square and inquired why they remained there, wondering if no one had invited them in. They replied that no one had taken them in. The old man then offered them shelter for the night. The Levite expressed gratitude, assuring the elder that they required nothing but a place to rest, as they had sufficient provisions for themselves and their donkey. The old man agreed, and so the Levite, his servant, and his concubine spent the night at his residence in Gibeah. However, while they were enjoying their time, a group of wicked men from the city surrounded the house and knocked on the door, demanding the homeowner to bring out the man who had come to visit so that they could engage in sexual acts with him. At this pivotal moment, the homeowner stepped outside and pleaded with them not to commit such an evil act, reminding them that the Levite was under his roof. He offered his virgin daughter and the Levite's concubine instead, urging them to abuse them instead of the guest. We will discuss this further later in the video, but what occurred next is unimaginable. The scripture states that the man would not listen, so he took his concubine and delivered her to them, where they abused and violated her throughout the night until dawn, when they finally let her go. This is why I indicated that this video might be unsuitable for minors, as it could evoke distressing memories. Imagine a group of depraved men taking turns assaulting this woman all night long until they released her in the morning. The young woman, worn out, beaten, and abused, made her way back to the doorstep of her lord's house and collapsed there. When her lord rose the next morning and opened the door to continue his journey, he found his concubine lying near the entrance, her hands resting on the threshold. He called out to her to get up, but there was no answer. The woman had suffered so much abuse that she had died. He then placed her on his donkey and returned home. The subsequent events are tragic and horrific. Upon entering his house, he took a knife, cut his concubine into 12 pieces, and sent them throughout the territory of Israel. Those who saw this exclaimed that nothing like this had ever happened since the Israelites left Egypt. This situation encourages thoughtful discussion. The man dismembered his concubine and attached a message to each piece, detailing the atrocities committed by his own brethren, specifically the tribe of Benjamin. When the other tribes of Israel received this message, they were aghast, realizing the severity of the act, which had never been witnessed in their history. The narrative does not conclude here. There is much more in chapters 20 and 21 that highlights essential lessons for us to learn. The first lesson is that when we lack accountability in our lives, we are prone to significant deviations from morality. In Judges 19 verse 1, we read about a time when there was no king in Israel. When we are not held accountable and do not fear the repercussions of our actions, we are more likely to make poor decisions, thinking we can act in isolation without needing to answer to anyone. This was precisely the situation in Israel, where there was a law, but it was not respected or enforced, leading to unimaginable actions. The second lesson emphasizes the importance of treating every individual as a reflection of God's image. The Levite's response to the situation showed that he valued the life and dignity of the man over the safety of his own daughter and the concubine. We must remember to regard every person with dignity and respect, especially when faced with inappropriate temptations. The third lesson is that straying from God makes us increasingly vulnerable to committing acts we never thought we would. The book of Judges depicts a nation that has gradually distanced itself from God, culminating in the events of chapters 19 to 21, which illustrate the depth of their moral decline. Similarly, if we neglect our relationship with God, we too risk engaging in behaviors we once believed we would never consider. The story continues into chapter 20, where a civil war erupts among the 11 tribes of Israel against the tribe of Benjamin, responsible for the heinous crime. This leads to massive casualties on both sides, leaving only 600 Benjamite men alive. In chapter 21, the remaining tribes express concern for the tribe of Benjamin's survival due to the lack of women for the men to marry. This brings us to our fourth lesson: every poor decision carries consequences beyond our control. Although the actions of the Benjamites were wrong, the subsequent decisions made by the other tribes in retaliation also bore consequences they had to face. We can choose our actions, but we cannot choose the consequences that follow. The Israelites then attacked the clan of Jabesh-Gilead, killing the men and taking 400 women who had never been with a man to marry the surviving Benjamite men. However, this created a new issue, as there were still 200 Benjamite men without wives. The Israelites, having made a vow not to give their daughters to the Benjamites, devised a plan to allow the men to capture wives during a festival, thus circumventing their vow. During this event, the 200 men abducted women while they danced at the celebration. This story is indeed complex, but it illustrates how one bad decision can lead to another, affecting numerous lives. While some Benjamite men deserved their fate, many innocent individuals suffered consequences for decisions they did not make. The cycle of bad choices continued, demonstrating that decisions have far-reaching effects. Finally, the fifth lesson is that God offers grace even amidst our most destructive choices. The book of Judges concludes with the Benjamites taking the women they needed from the dancers they captured, rebuilding their cities, and returning to their inheritance. The final verse encapsulates the essence of the entire narrative. In those days, there was no king in Israel, and everyone did what was right in their own eyes. While God showed mercy to the tribe of Benjamin, allowing them to rebuild, it is crucial to remember that every action we take has consequences, often beyond our comprehension. See you in the next video. Until then, God bless you.